Explode evolutionary theory in 10 minutes. Hello, Roddy Bullock here, founder of Creation Reformation and your host for today's video where I intend to do just that. If you are an evolutionist, don't click away. I want to hear from you if you think that I am wrong in any way. You can reach me at the email address below. This email goes to me and me alone, and I will respond personally. Let's go. At Creation Reformation, we assert and defend a statement that we call the natural selection paradox, and here it is. Every current living thing evolved from a first life form solely by cumulative random evolutionary change. Now, if you ponder that statement for a few moments, you will realize that if this is a true statement, then it completely destroys the theory of evolution by natural selection as a scientific explanation for all current living things. Now, I am asserting that this must be a true statement if the theory of evolution is true. That is, if evolutionary theory is the true account for all current living things, then this must be a true statement. But this statement cannot be defended scientifically. Thus, the paradox, the natural selection paradox, because despite natural selection's role in nature, this statement must be true. Now, if you would like a full explanation of how we derive the natural selection paradox, I invite you to go to our YouTube channel and check out these two videos. In each of these videos, we give a full logical rationale for how we arrived at the natural selection paradox, why it must be true if evolutionary theory is true, and the implication for evolutionary theory, which is, of course, devastation. Now, if we want to evaluate the truth claims of evolutionary theory, we can speak in terms of necessary evolutionary change. That's the evolutionary change that evolutionary theory must be able to explain, and we can consider that with reference to this little diagram right here. Now, I am not trying to make a fact statement with this diagram. I populated this with random representative organisms, but what the theory of evolution purports to explain is how some living thing back then changed over time in a continuous line of descent with modification to every current living thing now. And it's not just human beings, it's every plant and animal and bacteria that is alive today, including you. Every current living thing is at the end of an unbroken chain of descent, evolutionary descent from a first living thing. Another way to say it is that every current living thing today can trace its ancestral evolutionary lineage in an unbroken chain of organisms back to this first living thing. Now, in evolutionary terms, we can speak of genotypes and phenotypes. The genotypes are the genetic coded building instructions that build the thing in nature, which we call the phenotype. So evolutionary theory, the necessary evolutionary change that it must explain, for example, is how the genetic coded building instructions that built this phenotype, whatever it was, this early organism, it doesn't matter for our purposes, whatever it was what it was because it had a set of coded building instructions to build it. Evolutionary theory states that this set of coded building instructions changed over time into a different set of coded building instructions to build a different organism. And this cumulative change over time, each genetic code building instructions building a new phenotype in nature continued in an unbroken chain all the way down to now, and we have every current living thing, including you and me. Now, if this idea that every current living thing on Earth today can trace an unbroken ancestral lineage all the way back to a first living thing, if that strikes you as odd, I can assure you that it is not. That is standard evolutionary theory. It is, in fact, a fact that must be true if evolutionary theory is true. And evolutionists often show this fact in what they call phylogenetic trees, and here is one. A phylogenetic tree is an attempt to organize an explanation for all current living things and how they relate to some first living thing. In this case, it's only up to the domain level, but each of these could be extended out to each species. For example, animals can go out to these species. And the idea is that for every organism alive today, which is at the end of one of these lines, a continuous line of organisms, a continuous line of descent with modification exists to explain the change from this first living thing all the way out to, in this case, a human being. Let's say that is you or me. Now, we can imagine, for example, that this line is populated with past organisms, all ancestors of you, and we can represent them by these dots. And again, this is similar to what I represented up here. The idea is that there is an unbroken chain of parent to offspring, parent to offspring, parent to offspring, with evolution happening at each stage all the way out to this end of the line, which could be you or me. Now, if we put this little diagram up here that must be a fact of evolution, we are going to make a fact statement that we've already made, actually, and then we are going to ask a question. The fact statement we can make is this. Every current living thing, for example, you, lies at the end of an unbroken chain of ancestral organisms, all these organisms, in a continuous line of descent with modification from a first life form on Earth. Again, this is just a fact of evolutionary theory if it is a true account for all current living things. Now, if we just zoom in on a portion of this line here, it doesn't matter where, we're going to look for any two adjacent organisms. So we can just randomly name one, organism 1 and organism 2. With a recognition that for this theory to work, every organism represents an evolutionary change from the organism before it. If there was no evolutionary change, then we would never get to the end of this line. So every organism represents an evolutionary change from the organism preceding it. And so here we have organism 1 and organism 2. And with that in mind, we can ask this question. For any two adjacent organisms in the unbroken chain of ancestral organisms, what kind of evolutionary change happened to distinguish organism 2 as evolving from organism 1? You may want to pause the video at this point. I'm going to move on because I only have 10 minutes. But we are talking about evolutionary change, and we are looking specifically at the evolutionary change that accounts for the evolution of organism 2 from organism 1. What change happened? What kind of evolutionary change happened to distinguish organism 2 as evolving from organism 1? And when we speak of kinds of evolutionary change, what I'm getting at is, are these changes random or non-random? Now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to move ahead and I'm going to say, and you can challenge me if you like, but the only evolutionary changes that account for the changes in organism 2 from organism 1 are random. The only evolutionary change that happened from organism 1 to produce organism 2 was random genetic variation, random genetic mutation. It is a change to the heritable genotype in organism 2 that produced a different phenotype. That is the only change that happened from organism 1 to organism 2, and those changes in standard evolutionary theory are considered random. They are random. They are not planned. They are not purposeful. They are not designed. They are not predictable. They are completely random. So with this in mind, this fact and this question and this diagram, it should become relatively easy to agree with me that the natural selection paradox is a true statement. Let's read it right here. Every current living thing, you up here, and giraffes and octopuses and birds, every current living thing evolved from a first life form right here solely by cumulative random evolutionary change. The only evolutionary change that accounts for one organism evolving from the previous is random evolutionary change, and it is cumulative, 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 all the way down the line. And of course, this statement is true only if evolutionary theory is true. That's our caveat always. And it's true despite natural selection's role in nature. Natural selection is operating in this diagram, but natural selection is not operating to explain any organism as evolving from the previous organism. Natural selection is operating off this line to bring certain organisms to extinction. They never end up at the end of this phylogenetic tree. So there you have it, the natural selection paradox. If you would like to see how other evolutionists have attempted to show me that I'm wrong, you can do so in these videos at our YouTube channel. You can look at the titles and go there and look. And also at our Substack page, we have a post, again, where an evolutionist tried to show me that I was wrong. And you will see that in all instances, they failed. So if you want to believe in the theory of evolution, you must believe that this statement is true. And if you want to believe that this statement is true, to support your belief that the theory of evolution by natural selection explains your existence, then you're not believing a scientific statement. You're not believing a scientific theory. You are believing something by faith. It might even be a belief in magic. But in any event, you need to wrestle with the natural selection paradox that must be true if evolutionary theory is true and yet cannot be supported scientifically. All right, before I sign off, I want to bring your attention to the naturalselectionparadox.com website. You can go there to find much more information. And if you support what I'm doing here, if you support the work of Creation Reformation and you would like to do it monetarily, we would like that. And you can do so at Patreon, Creation Reformation, patreon.com. Go there. You might even be the first one to make a monthly pledge. Now, at this time, I believe my 10 minutes is up, so I am going to sign off by saying goodbye and good day.